Hello, survivors. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, if you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Also, tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. It's great to see how far our community reaches. Now, let's start the story. Shore leave. That's all we were thinking about. 3 glorious days docked in San Diego after 6 months floating around the Pacific on the USS Defiance, a guided missile destroyer that felt more like a floating tin can than home. I'm Petty, Officer 3rd Class Mike Simmons, just turned 22, working down in engineering, keeping the lights on and the engines humming. All I wanted was a cold beer that didn't taste like desalinated water and maybe some non-Navy chow. We hit port around. 800, sun shining, seagulls squawking. Looked like a postcard. Everything felt normal. Too normal, maybe, in retrospect. The first inkling that something was off came from the dock workers. Usually they're buzzing around, forklifts zipping, cranes swinging containers. That morning they were scarce, huddled in small groups, casting nervous glances back toward the city skyline. Then there was the unusual number of ambulances heading into the naval base, sirens blaring, not away from it. My buddy Pete, a fellow engineer, nudged me as we waited in line for Liberty Call. Something weird's going on, man. Check the news feeds. My phone showed scattered reports, strange incidents downtown, a major pileup on the I-5 bridge, a quarantine, mentioned at Balboa Naval Hospital. Standard city chaos, maybe, but the reports had an edge talking about unusually aggressive individuals and unexplained violence. Still, shore leave beckoned. The CO, Captain Eva, gave the standard pre-Liberty brief. Represent the Navy well, don't get arrested, be back by 0600 Friday. Nothing out of the ordinary. Pete and I were among the first off the ship, heading for the main gate and the promise of civilization. That's when we saw the MPs setting up roadblocks inside the base perimeter. Not just routine checks, but heavy. Barricades, Humvees blocking intersections, soldiers in full combat gear taking up positions. What the hell? Pete muttered. This ain't no drill. An officer, Lieutenant Commander Wells, intercepted us near the gate. Simmons, Peterson, Liberty's canceled. All personnel report back to your ships immediately. Base is under lockdown, condition zebra. Condition zebra. That was maximum alert. Watertight doors sealed. Full battle stations. Sir, what's happening? I asked, the shore leave fantasy evaporating fast. Wells's face was grim, pale under his cover. Got reports coming in from downtown. Some kind of outbreak. Fast-spreading infection. Extreme aggression. CDC's involved. Just get back to the ship, Petty Officer. Safest place to be right now is underway. The urgency in his voice sent a chill down my spine, colder than the Pacific breeze. We double-timed it back toward the pier, passing other confused sailors being turned back by armed guards. The atmosphere on the base had transformed in minutes from relaxed shore leave anticipation to tense, barely controlled panic. Sirens wailed constantly now, joined by the occasional crackle of distant gunfire from the direction of the city. Back. Aboard the Defiance, the klaxon blared. General quarters, general quarters. All hands man your battle stations. Set condition zebra throughout the ship. This wasn't a drill. Hatches slammed shut. Watertight doors sealed with heavy thuds. Damage control teams suited up. Down in engineering, Chief Ben, a 20-year veteran, who'd seen action in the Gulf, was already coordinating. Simmons, Peterson, secure number 2 engine room. Reactor crew, status report. His voice was calm, but his eyes scanned the gauges with intense focus. We moved through the narrow passageways, the ship's steel belly now feeling less like a familiar workplace and more like a trap. From the ship's internal comms, fragments of information painted a terrifying picture. The infection was spreading through San Diego like wildfire. Hospitals overrun, police overwhelmed, reports of cannibalism. The word zombie, whispered at first, started appearing in panicked transmissions before command ordered radio silence except for essential traffic. Through a porthole in the auxiliary machinery room, I caught a glimpse of the pier. chaos. Civilians were trying to storm the base gates, desperate for sanctuary. The guards fired warning shots, then lowered their weapons as figures emerged from the crowd. Figures with gray skin, vacant eyes, and bloodied mouths, lurching forward, with unnatural speed attacking the guards, biting, tearing. The pier became a slaughterhouse within minutes. "Seal the brow!" Captain Eva's voice boomed over the 1MC, the ship-wide PA system. "All lines cast off. Emergency sortie. Get us the hell out of here." Down in engineering, we worked frantically. The ship needed power, steam, propulsion. The turbines began to whine, the deck vibrating beneath our feet. But just as the mooring lines were being cast off, a new alarm sounded. Intruder alert. "They're aboard," Chief Ben yelled, grabbing a fire axe from the bulkhead. "Intruder alert, aft mooring station. Security team respond." But the security team was already engaged near the main gate trying to hold back the tide. Before anyone could react, the hatch to our engineering space burst open. 2 sailors stumbled in, clutching bite wounds, faces contorted in agony. Behind them, moving with that terrifying, jerky speed, came another sailor, Davies from Supply. Or what used to be Davies. His eyes were milky white, uniform torn and blood-stained, teeth bared in a snarl. He lunged at the nearest wounded sailor. Panic erupted in the confined space. Someone screamed. A wrench clanged against the deck plating. Davies ignored the noise, focused solely on his victim, tearing at the man's throat. Then the second wounded sailor stiffened, convulsed, and turned, lunging at Pete. This wasn't just outside. It was inside the ship. The infection was aboard. The Defiance. The lockdown hadn't kept it out. It had sealed us in with it. Our steel fortress had become a contaminated floating tomb, and we were just getting underway. Chief Ben didn't hesitate. He swung the fire axe, connecting solidly with the Davies thing's head. It dropped instantly. Pete scrambled back, narrowly avoiding the second infected sailor's snapping jaws. I grabbed a heavy pipe wrench, the only weapon within reach. "Headshots!" I yelled, remembering the brief glimpse of the pier chaos. "Aim for the head." The Q, second infected, the one who'd just turned, lunged at me. Its movements were clumsy, uncoordinated, still learning its new body. I sidestepped, bringing the wrench down hard on its skull. Bone crunched. It collapsed. Silence except for the thrumming turbines and the ragged breathing of the remaining engineers. "Seal this compartment," Chief Ben ordered, pointing to the main hatch leading further into the ship. "We barricade here until security clears the upper decks." 2 other engineers, Chen and Ramirez, younger guys like me, shoved heavy tool chests against the hatch, securing the dogs. We were trapped in main control, the heart of the ship's propulsion, but also potentially cut off from the rest of the vessel. Through the internal comms, we could hear fragmented reports of fighting on multiple decks. Gunfire echoed faintly through the steel hull. "Damage Control Central, this is main control," Chief Ben spoke into the comm mic, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. "Engineering space is secure, but we have confirmed infected aboard. Request immediate security sweep and assistance." Static answered him for a long moment. Then a garbled voice, barely recognizable as the ship's XO, Commander Evans. "Negative assistance available. Multiple decks compromised. Captain, initiated Protocol Omega." The transmission died. Protocol Omega. We all knew what that meant, the absolute last resort. Scuttling the ship, sacrificing the vessel and everyone aboard to prevent a compromised warship from falling into enemy hands, or in this case, preventing whatever plague this was from leaving port. Except, we were already leaving port. The ship shuddered as the tugs pulled us away from the burning pier and into the channel. "They're gonna sink us?" Pete whispered, his face ashen. He looked down at his own hand, where the second infected sailor had scratched him during the brief struggle. It was just a surface wound, barely bleeding, but in this new reality, any contact was suspect. "Chief." Ben slammed his fist against a console. "Not while I'm chief engineer. This ship isn't going down without a fight." He looked around at us, the handful of engineers trapped in main control. All right, listen up. Forget Protocol Omega. Forget waiting for security. We've got maybe 6 engineers left down here. The ship's underway, but who the hell knows who's on the bridge? Or what they are now? He tapped a schematic on the wall display. Our priority is containment within the ship. If we can secure engineering, weapons control, and maybe the bridge, we might have a chance. Ramirez Chen, check secondary power conduits. Make sure life support and internal security systems stay online. Pete? He paused, looking at the scratch on Pete's hand. Keep an eye on that. Tell me instantly if you feel off. You monitor reactor status. Simmons, you're with me. We need weapons. Weapons, Chief? I asked. Engineering wasn't exactly stocked with firearms. Security locker, level 3 aft, Ben replied, grabbing the fire axe again. Standard emergency loadout, shotguns, sidearms. If security's gone, it's ours now. He checked the hatch we'd barricaded. Silence from the other side for now. We moved fast, quiet, and Simmons. He met my gaze, his eyes hard. If you see anything, twitching, anything that looks wrong, you don't hesitate. Headshot. Clear? Clear, Chief, I said, hefting the heavy pipe wrench. Leaving the relative safety of main control felt like stepping into a shark tank. We moved through the narrow, dimly lit passageways of the lower decks, the ship's engines a steady thrum beneath our feet, a stark contrast to the chaos we knew was unfolding above. Watertight doors were sealed everywhere, isolating compartments, but that also meant any infected trapped on our side were trapped with us. We heard the first, one before we saw it, that wet gurgling sound echoing down a ventilation shaft. We froze, pressing against the bulkhead. A figure emerged from a side passage, a cook from the galley, apron stained crimson, cleaver gripped in one hand, eyes vacant. It hadn't seen us yet. Chief Ben signaled, silent takedown. He moved like a shadow, circling behind it while I created a small diversion, tapping my wrench lightly against a pipe further down the corridor. The cook thing turned toward the sound, and Ben brought the axe down swiftly, cleanly. One less threat. We reached the ladder to level 3. Sounds carried, more clearly here. Distant shouting, something heavy being dragged across decking, and intermittent gunfire. The fighting was still going on, but it sounded scattered, disorganized. We climbed the ladder, emerging into another dimly lit corridor. The security locker was 50 feet ahead. Locked, of course. Standard maglock, Ben muttered, examining. The panel. Should be able to... He was cut off by a blood-curdling scream from further down the corridor, followed by a burst of automatic fire. Security team, I whispered, recognizing the sound of their standard-issue M4s. They're still fighting. We moved toward the sound, weapons ready. Rounding a corner, we saw them, 3 security personnel pinned down behind an overturned equipment cart, firing desperately at a swarm of infected pouring out of the ship's laundry. There were at least 10 infected, maybe more, including sailors, and what looked like civilian dock workers who must have gotten aboard before the lockdown. The security team was outnumbered, low on ammo. "Covering fire!" Ben yelled, charging forward with the axe. I followed, swinging the wrench. Our sudden appearance surprised the infected momentarily, splitting their attention. One turned toward me, a young female sailor, eyes rolled back, jaw hanging slack. I didn't hesitate, bringing the wrench down hard. Chief Ben cleaved through another with the axe. The security team leader, a tough-looking master-at-arms named Diaz, recognized the opportunity. Fall back to the locker," he shouted to his remaining 2 members. We fought shoulder to shoulder, creating a small perimeter, pushing the infected back inch by bloody inch toward the security locker. Diaz used his sidearm with deadly efficiency, conserving rounds, while his team laid down suppressing fire. Ben and I handled the ones that got too close with our improvised weapons. It was brutal, close-quarters combat in the narrow confines of the destroyer's passageway. We made it to the locker. Diaz swiped his keycard, throwing the heavy door open. Inside were racks of shotguns, M4s, sidearms, and crates of ammunition. Heaven. Reload! Barricade! Diaz ordered. We slammed the locker door shut, bracing it with weapon racks just as the horde hit it from the outside. Hands clawed under the EI. Dewar, guttural snarls echoing through the steel. Diaz turned to us, breathing heavily, his face grim. Chief Simmons, thanks. We were about done for. He looked at his two remaining team members, Miller, no relation to the prison inmate. Just awful coincidence, and Torres. Both were wounded. Miller with a deep gash on his leg, Torres clutching a bitten shoulder. The bite. I started, looking at Torres. Diaz shook his head. Happened 10 minutes ago. He's already got the fever. Torres began to shiver violently, groaning, his eyes starting to glaze over. Diaz raised his pistol, his expression hardening. I'll handle it. Miller, secure that wound. Chief Simmons, gear up. We need to get a message to the fleet. This thing isn't contained to San Diego. It's seaborne. He gestured toward Torres, who was now convulsing. It's already on the Defiance. A single shot echoed in the confined space. Diaz didn't flinch. And if it's on our ship, he added, his voice dangerously quiet, it's probably on others too. The reality hit me. The lockdown, the sortie. It wasn't about keeping the infection out of the base. It was about stopping compromised ships from leaving, and we were already underway, a floating petri dish carrying the plague out into the open ocean. Armed with proper weapons, shotguns for close quarters, sidearms, plenty of ammo, the five of us felt slightly more confident, but the strategic situation was grim. We were trapped on a moving ship with an unknown number of infected crewmates, cut off from command, and heading out to sea. Comms are shot ship-wide, Diaz confirmed, trying the locker's internal communication panel. Either damage from the U, fighting, or intentional sabotage. Where's the captain? The bridge? Chief Ben asked. Last transmission I heard before everything went crazy mentioned the XO activating Protocol Omega, Diaz replied. If the captain didn't countermand, the scuttling sequence might already be active. Not happening, Ben growled. Simmons, Miller, let's get back to main control. We need to verify engine status and override any scuttling commands. Diaz, Torres is gone, but can you and your remaining man secure this level? Maybe try to reach the secondary comm station? Near CIC? Diaz nodded. We'll try, but Chief, that bite on Petty Officer Peterson back in engineering? Ben's face tightened. We're monitoring it, but right now keeping this ship afloat and under our control is priority one. He hefted a shotgun. Let's move. The journey back down to engineering was faster, deadlier. We moved with purpose, shotguns clearing corridors, covering each other. We encountered more infected, sailors we recognized, faces frozen in mindless rage. Each kill felt like a betrayal, but hesitation was death. We found the hatch to main control still barricaded. Chen! Ramirez! Ben yelled, banging on the steel. It's the chief! Open up! The barricade shifted, and the hatch dogs released. Chen pulled the door open, his face pale. Chief, you made it, Peterson, Mahi. We pushed inside. Pete sat slumped against a console, head down. As we approached, he looked up. His eyes were clear, frightened, feverish, but clear. Chief, I don't feel good, he rasped. The scratch on his hand was red, inflamed, angry-looking streaks running up his arm. How long? Ben asked gently. Since Davies' buddy got me? Maybe 40 minutes? Pete coughed, a racking sound. Okay, son, Ben said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Okay. Ramirez, keep monitoring those reactor levels. Chen, watch. The hatch. Simmons. He gestured me over to the main propulsion console. Check scuttling sequence status. My fingers flew over the controls, accessing the emergency systems override panel. Red lights blinked ominously. Scuttling sequence initiated. T-minus 47 minutes until detonation. Chief, Protocol Omega is active, I reported. 47 minutes. Ben swore, moving to the console beside me. All right, sequence requires dual command authorization override. I've got chief engineer credentials. We need bridge command or XO. XO initiated it, I reminded him. He won't override. Then, we need the captain, Ben said grimly. Or someone acting with her authority. Just then, Pete let out a choked gasp. He stiffened, eyes rolling back, body starting to convulse. No! He gurgled, fighting it, but the transformation was taking hold with horrifying speed. Much faster than 40 minutes. The scratch? Maybe it transmitted faster, or maybe different strains? We knew nothing. Chen raised his shotgun, tears streaming down his face. Pete! Hold your fire, Ben snapped. He grabbed a heavy chain used for securing equipment. Help me. Together, Ben, Ramirez, and I managed to subdue the thrashing, snarling thing that had been Pete, chaining him securely to a reinforced stanchion. His milky eyes fixed on us, teeth snapping, inhuman growls ripping from his throat. Seeing him like that, chained, lost, it was worse than shooting Mike had been back in the tunnels at the station. Why? Chen asked, lowering his weapon, voice shaking. Why not just... Because maybe Lena was wrong, Ben said, his gaze fixed on the chained Pete. Maybe there is a way back, or maybe... He looked at the scuttling countdown clock, 42 minutes remaining. Maybe we need to understand how this thing works if we're gonna survive it. The ship shuddered again, a deeper vibration this time. Not engines, but something external. Chief, Ramirez called from the reactor monitoring station. Periscope. Depth proximity alarms. Something big just passed beneath us. Beneath us, out here? We were miles off the coast now, in deep water. Submarine? Unlikely without identification. A new alert flashed on the main console. Hull integrity warning. Multiple microfractures detected. Aft sections. What the hell is going on? I breathed. Before Ben could answer, the ship's 1MC crackled to life. Not with a human voice, but with a sound that chilled me to the bone. A low, resonant clicking sound, like giant insects communicating, echoing throughout the entire ship. It felt like it was coming from the steel bulkheads themselves. The clicking intensified, resolving into something almost like words, ancient and alien. The thing chained to the stanchion, the thing that was Pete, suddenly stopped thrashing. It tilted its head, listening, a horrifying mimicry of understanding dawning in its milky eyes. Then it looked directly at me, and its ruined mouth stretched into something that wasn't quite a smile. The lockdown hadn't just trapped the infected in. Maybe it had trapped us in with something else entirely, something that had just woken up. The alien clicking resonated through the steel hull, a sound that felt like it vibrated in my bones. It wasn't just broadcast over the 1MC. It felt like the ship itself was speaking, or something within the ship. The Pete thing remained unnervingly still, chained to the stanchion, its clouded eyes fixed on me, that grotesque smile widening. What is that? Chen whispered, backing away from the comm panel. Never heard anything like it, Ramirez muttered, his eyes glued to the reactor gauges which were fluctuating erratically. Chief, core temperature is spiking. Impossible. Ben shoved me aside, scanning the readouts. Safety interlocks are engaged. It shouldn't, unless... His eyes went wide. Sabotage. Someone with command codes bypassed the interlocks before the outbreak. He looked back at the schematic where Commander Evans, the XO, had initiated Protocol Omega. Evans. Had he turned before giving the order, or was this something else? The clicking stopped. Silence descended again, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the hum of machinery and Pete's strained, gurgling breaths. The scuttling countdown clock showed 38 minutes. Okay, Ben took a deep breath, regaining control. Reactors unstable but holding for now. Priority remains overriding Omega. We need bridge access. Diaz. He barked into his handheld radio, hoping the localized comms still worked. Diaz, status. Static, then Diaz's strained voice. Chief, and we secured secondary comms, but it's bad up here. Level 2 is thick with them. We lost Miller. A pause, then. whatever made that noise. It riled them up. They're acting smarter, trying doors, working together almost. Working together? That was new and terrifying. Diaz, we need bridge command codes to override scuttling. Can you reach the captain's cabin? Her emergency data pad should have them. Negative, Chief. Captain's cabin is on the other side of Officer Country, completely overrun. We're barricaded in comms 2, barely holding. What about the bridge itself? Sealed tight. Tried blasting the hatch. No dice. Whoever's in there or whatever is in there isn't opening up. Diaz coughed. Chief, I don't think we're getting off this ship. Ben slammed his fist onto the console again. Trapped. Reactor going critical, scuttling sequence active, infected crewmates getting smarter, and something else. Something communicating through the ship itself. My eyes fell on Pete. He was watching us, that horrifying smile still fixed on his face. But his eyes, they weren't entirely vacant anymore. A flicker of something else was there. Recognition? Malice? The files, I said suddenly. Pike and Titan back at the CDC. They mentioned Project Echo wasn't the first attempt. Other facilities, other trials. Ben looked at me sharply. What are you saying, Simmons? What if this infection isn't new to the Navy? What if Protocol Omega isn't just about scuttling? I remembered Commander Wells at the gate, the urgency, the talk of CDC involvement before things got completely out of hand. What if they knew something like this could happen? Lena, who had been quietly tending to Pete's chained form, despite the obvious danger, looked up. The prions of the research logs Pike showed us mentioned accelerated mutation when exposed to certain frequencies, certain biological markers. She looked toward the hull, where the clicking had seemed to originate. That sound, it wasn't random. It was a signal, Ben finished grimly. Waking something up or controlling them. He looked at Pete again, whose smile had faded, replaced by a look of intense concentration, head cocked as if still listening to something we couldn't hear. The ship lurched violently, throwing us against the consoles. Red lights flashed. Hull breach imminent. Aft sections. Whatever passed under us is coming back, Ramirez shouted over the alarms. And it's not friendly. Weapons, Ben ordered. Chen, Ramirez, grab spares from the emergency locker. Simmons, watch Pete. If he tries anything... Pete suddenly thrashed against his chains, letting out a piercing shriek that wasn't human, or infected. It was something else, a sound filled with agony and... command? In response, heavy pounding began on the main engineering hatch, the one we'd barricaded. Dozens of fists, clawing, snarling. The infected outside were coordinating their attack. And from the depths of the ship, from the direction of the hull breach alarm, came a new sound. A deep, resonant thrumming, like massive machinery waking up, vibrating through the deck plates. Chief, Chen yelled, shotgun raised toward the green hatch. They're coming through! The barricade of tool chests shuddered under the combined assault. The scuttling clock showed 29 minutes. The reactor temperature was still climbing. The hull was being breached from below. Infected were breaking through the hatch, and the thing that used to be Pete was shrieking commands. We were surrounded, outnumbered, out of time. Ben looked at the chained Pete, then at the groaning hatch, then at the flashing hull breach warnings. His face hardened. There's one last option, he said, his voice barely audible over the chaos. The Seacox, emergency flooding protocol. If we flood engineering, we might stop the reactor meltdown, maybe slow down whatever's coming through the hull. Flood engineering? Ramirez stammered. Chief, that'll trap us down here, we'll drown. Better than burning in a reactor breach or getting eaten, Ben countered. He pointed to a secondary ladder leading up to a cramped ventilation shaft. That shaft leads to the outer decks near the missile tubes. It's a long shot. Might be sealed, might be full of infected, but it's the only way out if we flood this compartment. He looked at each of us, Lena, pale but resolute, Chen and Ramirez, terrified but ready, me clutching my wrench, mind racing, and Pete. Pete had gone silent again, head bowed, shuddering. Decision time, Ben said. Flood the compartment. Try for the shaft? Or stand and fight until the reactor blows or the ship sinks? The main hatch splintered, rotten hands reaching through the gap. The thrumming from below grew louder, closer. The clicking sound started again over the 1MC, faster this time, more urgent. Pete raised his head, his milky eyes fixing on the ventilation shaft ladder, then back at us. A single clear tear tracked through the grime and blood on his cheek before his face contorted back into that mindless, snarling mask. "Flood it," I said, meeting Ben's gaze. Whatever waited in that shaft, whatever waited on the outer decks, it had to be better than the hell engineering was about to become, better than becoming one of them. Agreed, Chen and Ramirez echoed grimly. Lena nodded silently. All right. Ben gripped the large manual wheel controlling the seacocks. Once I start turning this, there's no going back. 30 seconds to reach that ladder and get climbing. Go. He spun the wheel. Warning lights flashed. Flooding in progress. Compartment Delta. The roar of incoming seawater filled the space almost immediately. Chen went up the ladder first, then Ramirez, then Lena, pulling herself up despite her likely exhaustion. I hesitated, looking back at Pete, chained, helpless, snarling as the icy water began to swirl around his ankles. There was nothing I could do. I turned and scrambled up the ladder, pulling myself into the cramped, dark ventilation shaft just as the seawater reached my waist. Below us, the water level rose rapidly, engulfing the consoles, the machinery. The chained figure of Pete. The pounding on the main hatch stopped, replaced by the desperate scrabbling of infected trapped against the rising tide. The ship groaned around us as the cold water hit the hot reactor housing. Steam hissed. The thrumming from the hull breach intensified, sounding like it was right beneath us now. We climbed in darkness, the shaft slick with condensation, the roar of the flood below gradually fading as we ascended. Where this shaft led, whether it was blocked, whether infected, waited above, we had no idea. All we knew was that we had escaped the immediate horror, sacrificing our engine room, perhaps even stabilizing the ship, but emerging into an unknown. Darkness aboard a vessel still teeming with the dead and possibly worse, sailing blindly into an ocean that was rapidly becoming part of the apocalypse. The lockdown had failed, the outbreak was seaborne, and our survival was measured only in the rungs of the ladder beneath our grasping hands.